It had been more than 2 years since Rebecca Thompson started working as a cleaning lady at a restaurant. She was used to the hard work. Not only did she have to clean up the whole place, she also had to help out in the kitchen, taking out the trash and cleaning up. Even though Rebecca had a lot on her plate, her salary was enough to feed her 3 kids, pay her taxes, and pay all her monthly bills. Sullivan, her husband, chose to live off odd jobs for 6 years instead of looking for a regular job with room for growth. That was the worst part. His kids had to wear clothes from thrift stores and department stores with clearance sales and clearance prices because he didn't do much to help them. Rebecca never gave up hope though. She knew that something better was coming her way. Part of the reason for this was that Rebecca always knew Sullivan only cared about himself and didn't care that his family was close to being poor. Along with the 3 kids, Rebecca's grandmother Irene also lived with the family. Irene had just turned 85 years old, and her granddaughter and grandchildren loved and respected her. Even though Irene was very old, she was healthy and didn't need care. Michael, Luke, and Louise, Rebecca's children, were not as lucky. Michael and Luke were the same age, so they could wear the same clothes. For another season, Luke could wear the clothes that Michael couldn't fit. Boys only had to watch out not to tear or stain their clothes, shoes, or shirts. Louise, on the other hand, needed lots of new clothes more often. Sullivan didn't know about these basic needs. For him, buying new clothes was just something his wife and kids did for fun. The man, on the other hand, would rather spend his small amount of money on things he wanted, like snacks and beers at sports bars. This was the thing that made Rebecca the angriest, apart from not being involved in raising his kids and leaving everything up to her. He was also bad with money as a dad. "Sullivan, what's wrong with you? How much longer can you keep this up? I can't support and care for the whole family. Have you forgotten that this is also your family?" Rebecca asked Sullivan during one of their fights, after the electricity and gas bills went up by 20%. He was used to hearing his wife complain and thought that her crazy behavior would go away when she got her period. He was aware that Rebecca was quiet and gentle, which was one of the reasons he liked her. He also had to deal with his wife's more delicate needs. One day, Luke asked why he always wore the same clothes Michael had worn before. The other kids at school saw him and started to pick on him and bother him because of it. He told Rebecca that the kids at school were mean and that it wasn't a bad thing to get nice clothes from his brother. Rebecca didn't know what to do about the clothes. When Sullivan found out that the kids were after Luke, he felt almost the exact opposite of Rebecca. He needs to learn how to defend himself and fight back. This will be over soon. It's something kids do. He didn't say anything else about the case. Luke kept bringing it up and saying that he was the only one in class who didn't have enough money to even buy one candy bar. Sullivan got angry and told Luke to stop. The man said his mother's failure to save money was to blame for the problems in the family and pointed the finger at his wife. When the kid's grandmother Irene heard this, she decided to stay neutral. She could see that her granddaughter's marriage was going apart and didn't want to get involved because she thought it would make things worse. Rebecca finally asked for a divorce. She had to be very brave and talk to a lawyer for a long time to find out what rights she would have after the divorce was over. When she got home, she gave Sullivan the papers that the lawyer had prepared. She wanted her husband to pay attention to her. When Sullivan heard the news, he looked very upset. He even tried to get Rebecca to marry him again by telling her that things might get better. When Sullivan learned she was serious, he started to make trouble on purpose to make the divorce process longer. He said he had to talk to a lawyer first, but with each day that went by, he made up a weaker reason. But Rebecca wasn't going to be fooled. She called a lawyer who told Sullivan over the phone that the problems he was trying to cause would be added to the file and used against him in court. Sullivan was trying to damage things, but the lawyer stopped him. She also learned that Sullivan was planning to sue his wife to get half of the house that belonged to Rebecca's father. Sullivan was shocked by how determined his wife was, so he had to sign the papers and end their marriage for good. Even worse things started to happen to Rebecca's family after she felt the sweet hug of freedom. Things began to go wrong. Rebecca was by herself and had to rely on herself. The first hard thing she had to deal with was her grandma Irene's illness. They had to pay for a private appointment and then found out that the medicines that would heal the old woman were too expensive for her to afford. To stay on top of their classes, Michael and Luke also needed new books and healthy food. Of course, nobody could focus on their work if they were hungry. It was like this every day when she left the house for work. While she was working, Rebecca saw a lot of food in the kitchen while she was cleaning up at the restaurant. Sometimes the food that was ordered was not cooked at all. Some really tasty food like steaks, fish cuts and whole salads were thrown away. It made the woman sad because it was a waste of money and she was losing the ability to support her family. She often skipped dinner so she could eat more lunch the next day, but this made her think of something. What if she started bringing all the food that no one ate to her house? She'd have more money and food to buy school materials like snacks, medicines and books. Rebecca knew it wasn't the best idea, but she thought it was worth a shot. She would get over her pride and pay her bills on time. The next day, the cleaning lady came home from work with a container full of healthy, tasty food made by the cook at the restaurant where she worked. The kids snatched the food right away and ate it all up. It had been a long time since they had eaten something that looked so good, tasted so different, and was so unique. The truth is that the kids were sick of the meals that their grandmother Irene made every day. The next day, Rebecca brought 2 bags of food instead of 1 because she saw that her plan worked. This much food was enough for everyone to eat twice a day. That was it. The family had finally found a way to save money and eat better. Rebecca stuck to her plan and only took the food the customers had left over but hadn't eaten. Her view of the situation was that most restaurant customers were rich or had enough money that they didn't see a problem with returning meals or paying for dishes that would be left out. The customers at the restaurant didn't think it was a big deal, but it helped her family stay alive. Chef Jean-Pierre, on the other hand, was angry when the young cleaning lady took away the dishes that he had made after years of hard work and study, and that cost a lot because of this. She would have to make an appointment at the restaurant and pay a lot of money to try them. Just like everyone else, he would rather throw away the things that haven't been used than give someone lunch for free. Before this happened, Jean-Pierre had never seen or heard of a problem with Rebecca's work or any complaints from her while she was working for him. In his heart, the cook knew that the young woman was a good worker, so he saw this as a chance. He had to wait for the right time. He walked up to Rebecca as she was sorting the scraps that she would take home the next day after the kitchen and restaurant were closed. The cleaning lady almost lost it for a split second because she thought that everything was going to fail, and she would lose her job and the food as well. Realizing how weak the woman was, Jean-Pierre quickly told his co-worker that he would not say anything to Lester Johnson, the owner of the restaurant, but that in return, he would need some help. He wanted her to come to work 2 hours early to help him with the heavy jobs like peeling potatoes, carrots and cucumbers, cleaning fish, taking fats off meat, and making pasta. Rebecca should work longer hours to make up for not being able to buy the best food. Rebecca said that she wants to, but can't work for extra hours because that will throw off her family schedule. The cruel chef said, "You should have thought about that sooner, young lady." She couldn't say no to this offer because her job and the food she brought home were both on the line. So, this was Rebecca's new daily life for about 6 months. She began getting to work a lot earlier to help the cook and his colleagues with their work. She realized that she wasn't really helping the kitchen staff, but rather taking their place, since Rebecca was making all the food herself while Jean-Pierre and her team came later or hung out. While Rebecca was very tired, she was able to save enough money to buy Michael, Luke, and 3-year-old Louise new clothes. She bought medicine for her grandma and thought about the choices she had made months before. She realized that getting divorced from that jerk had been the right thing to do. Sullivan was still a lazy slob who tried to live off other people while drinking beer and going to the bar after a few months. After he left the house, he never spent another dime on his kids' needs. Even though Rebecca didn't want to fight about it, she was furious every time she thought about what a terrible father he had become. Because of this, she thought that the next step would be to ask for full custody of the kids. In this way, they would be protected from their father's bad behavior and lies. Rebecca went to the same lawyer who helped to get divorced for help. Mona Clark was a family law expert and didn't charge crazy amounts of money. When Mona Clark went into the Thompson family home to talk about the details of the upcoming trial, she kept an eye on the plastic containers of leftover food sitting on the kitchen table. There were recipes of chicken stews with shrimp and fish. Since Rebecca worked as a cleaner in a restaurant, the lawyer chose to keep quiet and not ask where the leftovers came from. Also, the lawyer saw that Rebecca looked very tired and asked the young woman about it. Rebecca, feeling embarrassed, told her that she had been working extra hours at the restaurant as agreed with the chef, Jean-Pierre, so she wouldn't get in trouble with the owner of the restaurant. As payment for her extra work, the cook would not bother with the leftovers she brought home every night. The fact that Mona knew the restaurant owner turned out to be the most important thing about the whole talk. The lawyer then went to find him. After his father died, Lester Johnson took over the family restaurant. The restaurant's menu had grown while Lester was in charge, and Jean-Pierre had been hired as the cook. Little Lester could enjoy a better life as the business made more money. The businessman bought Mona a glass of white wine and some small snacks when she came to see him. At first, the friends talked about unimportant things, and it took the lawyer 30 minutes to get to the most important subject. "Lester, did you know your cleaning lady Rebecca Thompson takes leftover food from your restaurant?" There was no doubt that Lester had always been close to Jean-Pierre. He told his friend that he did know. "Do you think she has a Rottweiler or pit bull at home?" "That's okay though, she's not stealing from the business. She can do whatever she wants with the extra food," the restaurant owner told her. But Mona found out that Lester didn't know who Rebecca was feeding or where she lived. Mona talked about the problem in a cool and nice way. "Actually, Rebecca's family is quite poor, and she has to take these leftovers so that her 3 children and grandmother can eat," she said. Lester dropped his eyes because he felt bad and asked, "Mona, are you sure?" When Mona put her hands on her friend's shoulder, her look showed that she knew what she said. "That's too bad. It doesn't end there," the lawyer said. "The chef is pressuring Rebecca to keep quiet in exchange for silence. Rebecca is doing work that the chef and his team should have done. She was scared that you, Lester, would fire her." The owner was sick to his stomach. He couldn't believe that one of his workers would take advantage of another worker in his restaurant in this way. After getting home that night, Lester threw himself on the couch to calm down, but he couldn't. It hurt him to think that Rebecca was working for the leftovers. He then called Jean-Pierre's number. He had to have a conversation with his cook in person. Things couldn't go on like this. "Jean-Pierre, do you know for whom Rebecca is taking the leftovers from the restaurant?" Lester wanted to know when the cook would be there. The cook turned pale. Just how did Lester know what the girl was up to? He stuttered and said that he never asked her, but he thought that the woman was just taking advantage of the situation to eat the best food for free. He also thought that she was probably having men over for dinner, because that's what she did when she was single. Lester shook his head and told the chef that she had done this to feed her grandma, 3 kids and herself. He also said that he knew she was working extra hours, without getting paid for them. Even worse, Lester already paid Jean-Pierre and his crew to do the work. When the cook heard this, he was shocked and blushed with shame. Finally, Lester Johnson said that things would soon be different, and that the cook would know what would happen to him. Not long after she got to the restaurant, Rebecca was called into Lester's office. Since she got the job, she hadn't had to go to that room, so her heart was racing. In her mind, horrible ideas began to form. Do they know what I've been doing for months? Will I be fired just as things started to get better? The cleaning lady's fears were taking over her mind. Lester told her good job and gave her a big envelope. When Rebecca opened it, she saw that it was full of $100 bills. She didn't understand why she was getting that much money. She saw something with 10 months' pay there. Lester made sure there was no mistake that it was all hers. "You work very hard and have been here a long time. There's nothing wrong, and I want to thank you for your hard work," the restaurant owner said. "I'm sorry if I didn't know how valuable you are to us and how hard you fight for your family." Rebecca cried as she gave her boss a big hug. He had never had a co-worker hug him like this before, and it made him feel good. Many times Rebecca thanked him, and of course, she asked Lester to her house for apple cake. Lester agreed to visit the next day after Rebecca asked him to, but he had one more treat for her, a bouquet of flowers and a contract. While they were enjoying the tasty cake, Rebecca read the paper and saw that Lester was going to open 2 more restaurants in town and would need to hire new workers. If Rebecca agreed, she would be given the job of cleaning supervisor and get 3 times as much money because she would be in charge of 3 restaurants. The young woman was shocked and put her hand to her mouth. And rest assured, Jean-Pierre will never again set foot in a restaurant kitchen in this city, said Lester. Before Lester could finish his phrase, Rebecca ran to hug her kids and grandmother. Lester had seen some of the most touching family moments in his life. He really missed his dad at the time, but he was happy making other people happy. No one left that humble home the same way they came in that day.